the more I read, the more I realized that there was another way of being. Because the family I come from, everything that you'd see as a little girl in this family was that you're a girl, you end up marrying someone and you have kids and you cook and you clean and that's your life. But because I started reading so early on, I saw some of my school friends and their moms who were engineers and doctors and a lot of my school teachers. I was seeing all of these women and I was noticing that they had an agency that I never saw the women in my family have. So all of these things reshaped me into becoming a rebel, into knowing that, if you fought for things, you could try to get those things. And my entire life has been fight after fight after fight of getting the things that I wanted. And sometimes the things that I didn't even know that I wanted. But eventually they became a very big part of who I am today.
Today's guest is Nikita Mandhani, an incredibly talented independent journalist and filmmaker based in India. Nikita spent 7 years at the BBC, where she produced documentaries and pioneered new audience strategies. Before that, she worked at the Washington Post and completed her master's from Northwestern University. In this conversation, Nikita shares how growing up in India and later moving to the US shaped her career and her relationship with home. She discusses her family's history as Sindhi refugees, her connection to migration stories, and the pressure of building a life abroad. She also opens up about reverse culture shock and why she decided to return to India. You can find some of Nikita's work in the episode description. It is the work that we mentioned in our conversation, and it is absolutely worth checking out. I learned a lot from Nikita, and I think you will as well. Nikita, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
I want to start with growing up in India and your family roots. Part of your work has been about your family's history, including your grandparents. How did that story shape your sense of identity, and also how did, through your journalism work, did you actually got into that part of your family's history?
So growing up, it wasn't a thing I thought about much because, I'm Sindhi. My grandparents moved to India from Pakistan, from this region called Sindh, where all Sindhis come from. And I grew up in the Sindhi community. I never knew that we were different or we were like a minority community. I only found out a little later in my life, I would say, when I started understanding more about immigrants and refugees. And I would say this was late teens, when I was reading more books about migration. And that is when all of these questions just started cropping up in my mind about my own family's history, because my family never talked about it. And my grandparents, I lost them when I was really little. So, I never asked them these questions. And for me, then journalism became one of those ways to ask other people about their lives, about their stories of migration. And I feel like the more I did those stories, I just felt closer to my own history, to my own ancestors. When you're forced to leave your land and rebuild a life in a different land, then the choices you make and how do you still try to hold on to your culture. So yeah, there were all of those similarities. And I think that really drew me towards stories of refugees and immigrants.
I want to talk about your journalism career and how did that started to shape. You mentioned when you were a teenager as well, right?
Not really, actually. So when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a pilot. Journalism was never on my mind. I didn't even think about it as a career. I used to write a lot. So for me, I always thought, I would become a pilot. And then I would also keep writing. And what I used to write about, it was more creative writing. But journalism really did not enter my life, I would say, until I was 22, because I was an engineer at this point. Started writing a blog. Most of my friends were engineers who did not read. And they would always, ask me, can you suggest some good articles and stories that we should be reading? So I started writing this blog where I just simplified things for people, because it was so difficult sometimes to understand what was happening. And, you would read one article and that would not be enough. So what I started doing was, if it was about the Syrian refugee crisis, for example, I would read 10 articles from famous publications and I would just, write it in a simpler language. And that's what I did for about 2 years. I was obsessed with that blog at some point. And then I hated engineering. I would literally go to office, code, and do whatever my work was, not tell my bosses that I was done, and start writing on my blog, to the extent that they had to block WordPress from the office computers because
Oh,
I
wow.
think someone found out. At that point, I also started freelancing just randomly, writing for websites and wherever I could. I just wanted to write all the time. And that's when I thought that maybe I needed to just quit my job and get into journalism, because I found out more and more about what journalists did. And, it kind of aligns with the interests that I had in my life, specifically storytelling, whether or I would just say that, everything that shapes me and the person I am, it's an intersection of stories and travel. And I felt that journalism was the best path for that.
So you quit your job and you actually started writing, independent writing.
Yeah, I quit my job. I applied for university in the US. I wanted to do a master's in journalism and like really learn it. I didn't tell my parents. It was all very dramatic, but eventually made it to the US and went to Northwestern University Middle School of Journalism, did a 1 year extremely intense program. And that actually just like it was like a crash course in everything.
Why the US and why was it very dramatic at that point?
You know why the US has a really funny story, but actually I watched a Bollywood movie where I saw this actor who goes to the US to study journalism and becomes this, travel show host. And he's doing all of the things that I want to do in my life, like I wanted to do it in my life. And I saw that and I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. And I checked which university he goes to in the film, actually, and he goes to Northwestern. So I started researching about Northwestern. Then I read more and more, all of these other journalism universities in the US and then the world as well. But for some reason, Northwestern, like there was just this thing deep in my heart for that. Also because they had this special course on refugees and immigrants. And there was a professor who specialized in that. And they had another program that let you, travel abroad and report from other countries. And I think there were a lot of these opportunities that the program gave you. And that's why I wanted to go there.
Yeah.
That's how it all came together. It was dramatic because my parents, especially my dad, was never supportive of my career. So for him, even me becoming an engineer was not like, he wasn't happy about that. I had to lie and make my way around a lot of things and leave home to be able to have a more independent life. So when I was applying for university, I did not tell him. I was just, giving all these exams and I was just making up random stories for my parents. But basically, when I got when I got an admit from the university, that's when I had to finally make the call and make a move. So it was difficult because he was not supportive, but he couldn't stop me because at this point I was more independent and, I was able to just do it by myself. It was hard because it's expensive, right? But eventually he didn't have the same sort of control over me at this point.
Yeah. So you moved to the US. Talk about a little bit about that cultural shock or not coming to the US. How did you feel?
I was so excited whenever we meet. It's exciting. But for me, it was really, really hard to do it. A lot of my friends, it was hard for them only in that sense of applying for university. And it's an excruciating process anyway. For me, it was worse because I had no support and I had to lie my way through it. Those 100,000 exams are like all of the things you have to do.
Yes.
Throughout that period, I kept feeling like something would happen and I would not be able to actually make it. So when I ended up in the US, it was magical for me because I was just like, oh my God, this happened. After all these years, this
Yeah.
finally happened. And I loved it for that. But in terms of culture shock, there were a lot of these little things, right, that are so different, especially when you compare it with a country like India, because we thrive in the idea of community. Friendships in a neighborhood, you know everyone. People are really, you have like huge families, all of that. So coming to the US, there was some things that felt really different to me in terms of that community aspect and boundaries. I would be invited to house parties of, my friends from college, and there would be no food in these parties. And for me, I was just like, but how is there a party without food? How can that even happen? Because that's not Indian at all. You can have a party without alcohol. You cannot have a party without food. So those sorts of things,
Yep,
eating family
yep.
style in
Yep.
restaurants, that's
Yep.
such a big thing.
Right.
But in the US, when people ordered their own meals, and I remember just like looking at those tables, being like, oh my God, I really want to try all of these things, like just take one bite,
Yeah.
but I can't because this is how it is. So there were all of these small things, right, that I just learned to live with, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The one thing that I honestly missed the most about home at the time, I remember, is that you had to make plans to meet people up way in advance in the US. So there were times when, I was bored on a weekend, but just because I was not proactive 2 weeks before to set something up for this weekend, I would just sit around being bored, like being by myself, or a day when I'm not feeling great and I would love some company and just like go out and have a meal with a friend or a drink with a friend. It was just so difficult to just call people up and be like, can we just meet for a drink?
Right.
Because people already had plans. That was weird. And that was one thing I genuinely missed about
Right.
India.
Yes. You mentioned before that you also weren't coming with the idea of staying. And I imagine that because of your family pressure and also because yourself. Did you want it to stay right when you arrived in the US?
Yeah. When I arrived, I remember it was fall in Chicago, one of the best weathers there.
Yeah.
I called my mom and I said, I'm never coming back. I remember just being like, this is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the funny response, my mom just said, just wait for the winter. So,
Right.
right?
Wait, yeah.
But no, I think it wasn't like I didn't want to stay. I wanted to stay, but I also knew that it would be hard for me in the sense of not for me, but the first year of me being in the US, my father was really sick and he was in the ICU. And my family didn't tell me too much about what was going on with him, but he was in a very serious condition. And I was just so torn at that time, being so far away from my family and not being able to be there with my dad when he was in the hospital. I think he was on a ventilator for a few days. And I just don't know what it did to me, but tore me apart a little bit. And then after that, I was still there for about 2 years after. And because of my family situation, because of, a lot of other things, I was in a relationship at the time. My partner couldn't work in the US because of, all these visa issues. So I think I just decided to not get stuck on this idea. The other part of it was also that I wanted to report from other parts of the world. And I was seeing that being in the US, it almost felt like then you're trapped. I don't know if you agree with that, but that is something that I had started already noticing, that once you're there, you're trapped in this whole bubble of I have to get my visa, I have to get my green card, then I get like it's a process and it's this never ending process. And as a journalist, I felt like such a big world, right? And I wanted to be able to report from other parts of the world and not just become someone who lived in the bubble of the US.
You're so right. I keep feeling that here. Because it's like a hamster wheel that never stops, and you need to not only visa wise. I feel like life here is always proving yourself constantly.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I did, right? I think I was there for 2.5, 3 years in total. I guess I worked as hard as normal people work in 10 years. Like I just crunched everything in that time. And also because my last year there, I knew I was going to leave and I wanted to make that year count. And I worked so hard. I can't even imagine working that hard now. But that 1 year, I did every possible thing to have, my name out there, to meet all the people I could meet, to do all the kinds of stories that I could do from there. I had a job at the Washington Post, but along with my job, I was constantly doing other work. I was lucky that I had a contract with them where, despite having a proper, like, 40-hour a week contract, I could freelance. So I kept freelancing for the Post, but for other organizations. I was working on the weekends. I was working outside of the 8-9 hour shifts that I did at the Post. So I was constantly working. I was applying to conferences and fellowships and every possible thing that last year so that I could come back and I could just be like, see, I proved myself. I've done all of this. And even after coming back, you feel like, oh, I've just come back. I've left that glamorous life behind and I need to prove myself here.
Yeah.
I need to show to all of the people who stayed there that, you can still have a good life outside of the US. And that's a lot of pressure, right? Like, I feel like you have to constantly just be like, fine, I came back to a country that's not considered as developed. I mean, because it's not, let's be honest. But even here, I can do the kind of journalism that you do there in the US. And that's been most of my life, I guess.
You're saying you work so hard to go to school and work at the same time here. Well, how did that started shaping? And also, how did you started to get interest in immigrant community stories and what pulled you into that while you were here?
I think the first thing that sort of pulled me in that direction was my first 3 months in the US. And when I had just started at university and I had to pick a beat, I picked Muslims in America. The
Yeah.
reason was that I had heard and read so much about 9/11 when I was a little kid. And then I kept hearing more and more about how the US started changing its stance on Muslims after that and how life was so difficult for them after that. And I was just so curious to finally find that out for myself for real. Because from India, I could only see the things that were portrayed in Bollywood, in pop culture, in all of these things, right? Now that I was in the US, I really wanted to meet Muslims there and ask them about their experience in the US and if they actually felt this, the things that I'd read or watched.
Yeah.
So I picked that beat. And then from there, a lot of things started shaping up because one of my professors in university, a lovely woman, she told me about Detroit, Michigan, and about Dearborn specifically, which is often called the Middle East of the US. And she helped me get a reporting grant to go to Dearborn and report from there. So this was literally within the first 3 months of me being in the US. And I went to Dearborn. I spoke to Arab immigrants there, and I understood so much more about their journeys in the US. And that shaped everything for me. Then this was the year when a lot of Syrian refugees were coming into the US, and specifically in Chicago. And because of my interest in the whole Syrian refugee crisis that I was writing about on my blog, again, that was something that really drove me towards these stories. And I started building contacts with the Syrian refugee community and the Syrian immigrant community and nonprofits that were helping them. I just went deeper and deeper into these stories. After, I would say, 6 months of this, I also got selected as part of, a refugee program, that the refugee reporting program that the university had. I was selected as a part of, these group of 10 students who was picked to go to Germany to report on refugees there, because this was again the year when a lot of Syrian refugees were coming to Germany. This was 2016. And at that time, the topic I picked was family reunification. And quite interestingly, I wanted to do that, pick that topic because my grandparents left their family behind in Pakistan. Some of their siblings are still there. They left their family behind and they moved to India. And I wanted to understand how it felt for the refugees who had left their families behind. Maybe again to find answers to my grandparents' stories that I could never find the answers to. A lot of the stories that I was doing, I just kept being, there was a calling there. I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand more. So even my story in Germany is so interesting that I became fixated in Chicago that I wanted to find a family where a member of the family is in Chicago and the other member of the family must be in Hamburg, where I was going. And my professors were like, that's too ambitious. That's just crazy. But I found a family. I found a sister who was in Chicago, and her two brothers were in a refugee camp in Hamburg. And it was just all so beautiful, right? Like it unfolded so beautifully for me that in Hamburg I met her brothers, and she hadn't met them in years.
Yeah.
Met the brothers in Hamburg, and I could just tell them about each other.
Wow.
And I was this connecting thread. It was just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
No, it was just something that still, like that experience has stayed with me
Yes. Yeah.
all of these years.
Yeah. One of those reporting stories that
Yeah.
you're never going to forget. And I want to also talk about the work in Between Two Cultures series, where you spotlighted second generation women navigating hyphenated identities. Talk a little bit about this.
I think again that series came because I was so curious about hyphenated Americans. I was always really curious about these stories of people, who grew up in a culture that's different from their parents' culture. And I was always just so curious about that, about living between two cultures and still trying to navigate your identity through those. So I pitched that series to the Lily, which was the Millennial Women publication at the Post. The Lily had just started that year. I worked on the Snapchat team at the Post, but the Lily was also beginning at the same time. So I pitched them a few text stories, and I was, doing these text pieces about Saudi Arabia, about India, about gender in, these different countries. So then Between Two Cultures came as a part of that. And this was my last project in the US. Like in my head, I was like, okay, that's that kind of series that I can't do in India. So because, India doesn't have a rich immigrant history and culture in the same way that the US does. So I pitched that series, and the Lily was really interested in it. I'm so happy that they gave me the chance to, just like go out there and make it. I wanted to talk to women whose parents had come from different parts of the world. So that was really important to me because I wanted to show people the diversity of the US and the diversity in the stories as well. So if you watch Between Two Cultures, you'll see that the women in these 5 videos, one of them's Vietnamese American, then there's a Palestinian American, there's an Indian American, there's a Cuban American, and there's a woman whose parents moved from the Democratic Republic of Congo, so a Congolese American.
Yes.
Very different parts of the world, very different stories.
Yes. I watched them all. I love them.
So glad. I mean, this was again literally my first 2 years of being a journalist. My heart is full when I look at that because being this young journalist and being able to do something that felt like a bit of a dream at the time. That's how it started. I just put a call out in different Facebook groups, and I said that I wanted to make the series, and if there were women in DC, because I didn't have the budget to travel to where these women were, I would have phone calls with them. Then I narrowed it down to, I think, about 30 women who I met in person. And I did like a short pre-interview with all of them. And then I picked the final 5. I picked them based on, of course, the stories, but also because, like I said, I wanted them to depict different regions. And I also actively wanted to show the stories of some sort of struggle as well. So I think it was a conscious decision that none of those videos are about people who moved from a developed Western nation to a developed Western nation.
That makes sense. I got a quote from one of your interviews, which was, "The first generation tries to fit in. The second works to reclaim what was lost." And I'm wondering if you feel that this personally with your own life. I mean, I know that, you live in India now, but like as you were immigrating, did you feel like you wanted to reclaim into your family's history as well what was lost there?
Honestly, that quote has stayed with me too over all these years, and it rings true. So I think that there are 2 sides to it, right? On the one hand, it feels very similar to my story of my parents not really thinking about their identity as Sindhis or trying to understand more about their family's history. and me being the person who's trying to do that. But in that case, I'm not even second generation because my parents were born in India. But for them and for their parents, it was all about survival because it was a tough life and, they didn't have a lot of money. So the entire focus went into survival. And then when it came to my generation, they were comfortable enough to send us to English medium schools, to, give us a good childhood. And I think because of that, I got the time and the resources to be curious and to then, feed into that curiosity. And I feel the same for, second generation immigrants in the US. I feel like their parents probably moved there in harder situations. Some of them, not all of them. But a lot of the times, you're trying to build a life in a new country and you're busy building that life for yourself, for your children. And then your children are the ones who start asking all of these questions of you and who start trying to find the thread that connects them to their original culture or their original countries. Because you see all of these examples, like I see a lot of Indian Americans who try to move to India for a little bit or who want to travel to India as adults because they want to understand this country better. When I moved to the US, I honestly didn't think too much about my identity as a Sindhi. Over there, I was an Indian and I was a woman. And I think these were the two identities that just defined me, right? I do feel like I became closer to my culture in some ways because I started cooking more and more Indian food. I felt really bad every year during Diwali, which is, India's Christmas. But I used to feel really bad that I was not with my family because that's one festival that no matter what, I never missed it. I had to be with my family for that festival. So I would actively make an effort to make Diwali special. And it's funny because it coincided with Halloween and it was just so different, right? The environment was so different. And then even then I would just be like, no, it's Diwali. So even if this is Halloween, I loved Halloween, but I had to celebrate Diwali. So I tried to, do these little things to be close to my culture. And I would go to the Indian neighborhoods sometimes and feel like I was in India again.
That's so true. I think, yes, for you, when you move and you start to see even things in your own culture that you didn't see before and start to embrace things from home that you don't embrace when you're home.
Yeah, but then when you move back, it's quite interesting because then it's, at least for me, it was a reverse culture shock.
Yeah. Wow. How so?
Because I was in the US for 2.5, 3 years. And during that period, I didn't really come back home. I came back home just once for a little bit, right after a few months after my father's surgery. But then I was there for 2.5 years without having come back to India because, like I said, I was working too hard and I really could not come back. So then I'd forgotten how noisy and how crowded India was.
Yeah.
So when I came back, oh my God, I felt like there were colors everywhere, which was great. Because in the US, you don't see colors everywhere.
Yeah.
So I came back and I was like, oh my God, this is, just so many things just coming at you. Different sounds, different colors, lots of people. And some of it is great, but some of it can feel so overwhelming. And it's been 7 years since I've moved back. I still find crowds really overwhelming. I don't like going to crowded places. I don't like being in places that are too loud. I do it for work if I have to, but beyond that, it's not a choice. And I find that very interesting. I don't like to go shopping. I don't like to go to malls because what happens is even when you're going to a mall to go shopping, you'll go to a store and there'll be, a lot of staff that'll come at you and be like, ma'am, look at this stock. We have this. What do you want? Because they're always just trying to probably get you to buy things. But that overwhelms me so much because I want to be able to shop the way I shop in the West, where just leave me alone and let me do my thing and let me just go and, buy whatever I want to instead of trying to convince me to buy something.
Yes. And before you came to the US, did you also felt this way, like overwhelmed by all these things? It was more when you came back.
It was more after I came back. I feel like before that, I was a bit overwhelmed. I mean, I've never liked shopping. So yeah, but But I was just used to how things were here, right?
Right.
I didn't know another way. I had traveled just a little bit to other parts of the world, but traveling for a bit is different compared to living somewhere.
That's interesting. There's not a lot of people talking about that reverse shock that happens when you come home, that it's still there and it's still the same things, but you don't see it the same way. Let's talk a little bit about your essay on protest culture. And I do want to touch on this because of everything that's happening in the world right now. You mentioned in that essay that growing up, thought that protest was dangerous, especially as a woman. It wasn't acceptable. You push back against those expectations.
The biggest thing that's shaped who I am, and I'm very, very different from the family that I come from. No one talks about international politics in the same way. No one cares a lot about what's going on in the world. No one cares a lot about protests. Like there is so much that's different in me because of books. Because I started reading at a young age, and the more I read, the more I realized that there was another way of being. Because the family I come from, everything that you'd see as a little girl in this family was that you're a girl, you end up marrying someone and you have kids and you cook and you clean and that's your life. But because I started reading so early on, I realized that to be my life. I saw some of my school friends and their moms who were engineers and doctors, and a lot of my school teachers, also women. I was noticing that they had an agency that I never saw the women in my family have. So all of these things reshaped me into becoming a rebel, into knowing that, if you fought for things, you could try to get those things. And my entire life has been fight after fight after fight of getting the things that I wanted. And sometimes the things that I didn't even know that I wanted. But eventually they became a very big part of who I am today.
What are you working on right now, Nikita, as a journalist?
I worked for the BBC for about 7 years. I left my job about 8-9 months ago, and then I went solo traveling. And after that, I've been doing a lot of freelance projects, and they've been really exciting. And I've continued to work for the BBC as well, on and off. And in a lot of ways, it's been quite exciting to be able to do a combination of things. I recently trained a group of journalists in Zambia, which was again lovely because I love to travel. and I feel like being someone who got the opportunity to work in the US and then working for the BBC. So I spent time in London on and off. I would spend time in Nairobi on and off for work. I feel so much like a citizen of the world. I solo travel a lot. So then the experiences that I've gained out of all of this, when I train other journalists, I feel quite fulfilled. So I've been able to do more of that. I'm also making a short documentary on healthcare workers in India. But more than everything, what I'm more excited about is the person I'm becoming. I feel like we don't talk about this enough because we're so busy in our lives and we are so busy in the work that we're doing. And that's what I've been doing for so many years. But after going freelance, I've gotten, these little pockets of times when I've been able to spend time with myself. I've been able to reflect a lot on the life I want to build for myself and the things that bring me joy and the uncertainty we're all living in, right? We're all talking about this time where countries are at war. Anything can happen at any moment. The plane crash in India, you can die at any moment. And the more I live in this uncertain world, the more I want to, connect with things that give me joy. And I'm trying to do more of that, finding, my grounding. I love scuba diving. I love solo traveling. I love walking in different cities and meeting people from around the world. I love yoga, climbing. There's so much. I love nature. And I feel like I'm really excited for what's to come in the future. And I'm trying to, find ways of bringing these other parts of my life together into my work life.
I feel like that's something we should think about and reflect on, especially now.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially because if you're a journalist and if you're consuming news all the time, it's so negative. What's happening? How do you plan for life? How do you do anything at all in this world? And then I have to hold myself back a little bit and I have to remind myself of all of the little things that bring me joy. And it's always the little things, right?
Yes.
And So want to tell everyone to do that because it's so
Right.
important.
Do you see yourself immigrating again? Do you want to see that in your future? And I want to ask you about the US, but it's going through such a hard time right now that I'm not sure how you feel about coming back here. Talk a little bit about that.
So, quite honestly, after I moved back, after being in Delhi for a year, I was like, I need to leave because
Mm.
Delhi is quite polluted. And I think that was my biggest reason at the time. I just thought that, okay, I don't want to live here. I also went through a lot of personal challenges and, a really, really bad time in life when I just moved back. And that's why I moved back. So I, I wanted to move, but then, it never happened. I kept trying, then COVID happened, and my life in Delhi just kept solidifying. I met people from all over the world who are my friends now, and it feels like sometimes I'm still in my international bubble a little bit, which helps because that is the one thing I miss about the US the most, that I had friends from different parts of the world, but then that's my life in Delhi as well. So I wanted to move, but it's not been something that I would want to kill myself over. I feel that for me, it's more about, okay, I've applied for a few jobs here and there over the years. Things didn't work out. And as an Indian with a weaker passport, it's harder, especially when you're a journalist. It's easier in tech. So that's been one part of it. But the other part of it is I've become such a glass half full person.
Yeah.
Because I feel that when you live these two lives, right? I've lived in the US and then I moved back to India. So when I moved back to India, I also looked at all the benefits of living here and I've started appreciating community so much. Uh, and all my friends, my British friends, they love India because we can decide to meet 2 hours before we have to meet. Like we literally,
Right.
like that's how we
Yeah.
live here now.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to be like, oh, do you want to meet after 2 weeks? I don't even know if I want to get out of bed that day, specific day, right? So I see things in all of those ways, and being here helps me travel a lot because I can work from home when I want to. So I visit my family a lot more, and then I take all the leave I can to travel the world. So there are all of those things. I don't feel like moving to the US because I'm scared of whatever's going on there, but also because I don't want to be trapped again. I mean,
Course.
I just feel like I want my freedom.
Hmm.
And I don't know why it feels like I'm freer in India right now
Hmm.
than
Yep.
the US.
Yep.
But keeping the US aside, very excited to move to a different part of the world. Whenever that happens, I've tried to make it work. I will try to make it work, but I love spending time in different cultures and immersing myself in those cultures. And I've done the US once, right?
Yeah.
I'd
Yep.
move there
Yep.
if someone, sponsored me without me having to work too hard for that. But I don't think I have it in me to go crazy
Yeah.
about that life.
Absolutely. I really admire that you come first and your mental peace comes first
Yeah.
before all of that. So
Right?
yes,
Because
yes,
I thought during COVID, I remember thinking this so much. I was like, thank God I'm not in the US.
yes,
Because COVID happened literally like a year and a half after I moved back to India. And here, having that community made all the difference.
of course.
People, strangers helped you. People got together to help people who didn't know each other. Like I made a video essay about it, but there were all of these little things that gave me so much hope at the time. I appreciated just those sounds from the street. You do start looking at, all the positives. And I've built such a beautiful relationship with my parents, a relationship that did not exist before I moved to the US. But after having come back, these last 7 years have brought me much closer to my family.
That's so nice. That's great.
So, yeah, so all of it just feels like worth it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I don't know what life would have been like on the other end, right? So maybe even that would have been worth it.
Yeah, you never know how.
Yeah, right? You
If
never know. It's like
yeah,
the book Midnight Library.
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
A
Yes,
lot
you
of
just never.
people actually have been getting in touch with me. A lot of students in the US or people who are, in their first jobs, they're asking me if they should stay or they should move back because
Oh,
they're
wow,
so
really?
scared
Yeah.
about what's happening in the
Yeah.
US. And, most of them Indians who are in the US now. And, I just always tell them that the thing is, you have the answer, I don't, obviously, but either way, it's going to be good. Either way, your happiness comes from within.
Yeah.
So wherever you are,
Yeah.
if you want to make it work, it's going to work.
Yeah. I feel like so many immigrants are going through that personal question right now. Living
It's
here.
hard though.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
No, I feel you because I don't want to put myself through that right now. It's so
Yeah.
depressing and sad.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
last
yeah.
6 months, everything you hear about whatever is happening, and we were talking about protest culture. And there was a time when I believed that protests could change things. I don't think that anymore because if people protest, but the people at the top who are the decision makers, if they don't really care about those protests, nothing can change. They can shut these protests down, right? But they won't change policy
No.
because they don't
Yeah.
want to. And if we keep electing them, this will keep happening. I mean, I just don't know if I don't know what can change things. And it's not just the US, it's literally the entire world.
I see it sometimes of just like a big lesson that we have to go through, unfortunately, to go through the other side of things. Why do we keep choosing this over and over until we stop?
I think I would just say that my time in the US was beautiful, and I still have some of my closest friends there.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing about this life we all have, and the life that I'm building for myself and want to build for myself. So
Yeah.
I guess for everyone, I know it's hard and it's sad, but we're all in this together. Find your
Yeah.
joy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nikita. I could talk to you forever, but I appreciate your time and I hope we can stay in touch and
Of course.
do
Thank
things
you so
together.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, I'm feeling like goosebumps talking about all of these things and having thought about all of the things that you asked me because, yeah, these are deep life questions, right? And how
I know. We can go so much deeper into this, I
a
feel.
movement can shape you so much. I really don't think I would have become the person I have become without having done all of these things that I've done.
Absolutely. Same here. Totally. Thank you, Nikita.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation and find it inspiring. If you did, please share this episode and don't forget to leave a rating. It really helps more people discover these stories. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.